Hi, Andrew Leonard here. In my hand, I'm holding a metronome. It's a Chord TM60 if you're curious about the model number. Now, regardless of what kind of metronome you're using, there are ways in which a metronome can be very, very helpful, and there are ways where a metronome can be very, very frustrating. At times, I'm sure we've all been tempted to take one of these and just throw it across the room. Now, before we take that kind of action, I'd like to give you two simple strategies for preparing yourself to use a metronome, which will hopefully save you some money not having to buy additional metronomes and improve your playing at the same time. So let me just dive in and get started. Now, the first thing to keep in mind is that when you put the metronome on, you should be able to play without one in time. And what I mean by that is you should be able to count and play, and you should be able to very precisely play the music that you want to use a metronome to make sure you're playing very strictly in time with. So the frustration often comes when we assume that the metronome is going to do that work for us. And if you think about it, you probably already know it doesn't do that. All it does is just keep a steady pulse. So the first one, and these are in no particular order, that the first one is you really need to know where the notes are that you're going to play and how you're going to play them. So if you're having any hesitations finding the notes with your hands when you're playing, that's going to cause you hesitation when you're trying to play in time with the metronome. So if you haven't sorted that out, don't expect the metronome to do it for you. The metronome can, of course, give you an opportunity to understand where your flaws are. If you think about it as a testing opportunity, you can gain a lot of information even if you can't play in time. Then the other part of this is that you have to physically be able to play in time. So it's one thing if you know your left hand should be grabbing a C chord, for example, and that your right hand should be picking the thumb on the fifth string and your index, middle, and ring fingers on the top three strings. It's another thing to be able to get there precisely at the time you need to. So again, the metronome will help you learn whether you really are being honest with yourself and saying, yeah, I can do this. This is not a problem. Or for you to be saying, actually, I thought I was better than the metronome results are really telling me. I've got a little practicing to do. So that's the first part. Now the second part is counting and playing in time. So one thing that I've noticed is that when I ask students, or when I do this myself, count and play, don't even put a metronome on, just count and play, that my counting goes in and out based on how well I know the rhythm. At certain parts, my counting is spot on, 1, 2, 3, 4, and then suddenly it disappears for a little while I'm noticing that the rhythms or the playing is a little harder and I stop counting. And then I start counting again. With my own playing, I really have to focus on being honest with myself and really making sure that when I stop hearing myself count, that I know that I'm not counting. Which brings me to another thing. When you do this kind of work, you do need to count out loud. That way it's pretty obvious. If you hear yourself counting out loud, you know you're in the right place. If you don't hear yourself counting out loud, well, you know that you got distracted, took a break, whatever, too hard to play in time, you name it. So again, put the metronome on, and even if you're not prepared to count and play, just let it be a test for you where you don't get frustrated at the end. You say, okay, that's really valuable feedback. Make a note in the music. If you're reading music, circle it. Say, okay, got to learn how to count and play that. Now, the other part of this, which I find really helpful, is to count and play, but not try to play in time. So again, when you put the metronome on, you should be able to count 1, 2, 3, 4, or 1 and 2 and 3 and 4, and as you go precisely in time with the metronome as you play. But if that's the weak link in your ability, then just focus on everything else which you can do really well, but take your time, pause, add in the counting as you need it, 1 and 2 and 3, etc. And allow yourself to link the counting with all of the playing, but not focusing on playing in time. I have found this to be an incredibly simple yet effective way to work on my own and work with students. And once we take a step back and realize that the metronome is the final part of the solution. But first there's some other practicing and solving of things that we need to do. Once you step back and realize that, then it kind of provides some freedom for you to just acknowledge that you have a little practicing to do, and it's not a big deal. Again, the worst thing you can do is put the metronome on, not knowing that any one of these things, one or more that is, are causing you problems, and expecting that the metronome is going to immediately solve them for you. And then turning it into frustration because you're having trouble playing with the metronome. So once you flip it around and you deconstruct all the different parts of what you need before you turn on the metronome, you have a very valuable way of improving your playing, getting feedback when you turn on a metronome, and then ultimately being prepared to play with a metronome successfully. So I hope this helps. If you like the video, leave a comment below. And of course, happy practicing, and here's to playing with ease.